Hello, everyone, and welcome to Lab Manager's Tech Trends webinar series. My name is Mary Beth DiDonna, and I'll be moderating today's discussion. Is your food testing lab ready for an FDA inspection? We like our webinars to be very interactive, so we encourage you to submit your questions to us at any point during today's webinar. Our speaker will address these questions during the question and answer session following her presentation. To ask a question or leave a comment, simply type your query into the question box, which is located on the right-hand side of your screen. We'll try to address as many questions as possible during our time together, but if we happen to run out of time, I will forward any unanswered questions to today's speaker, and she can respond to you directly if possible. Additional resources for today's presentation, including handouts, are also located on the right-hand side of your screen. I'd like to remind you that this webinar recording will be available on demand shortly following this presentation, so please watch your emails for information from Lab Manager on how to access this free download. I'd especially like to thank CloudLIMS.com for sponsoring this event. This support allows Lab Manager to keep these webinars free of charge for our readers. So with that, I'd like to introduce our presenter for today's webinar. Ankita Acharya is a LIMS implementation expert with CloudLIMS.com. She has worked with laboratories across the globe and specializes in understanding a laboratory's workflow requirements and assisting them with the LIMS implementation and configuration to automate their unique laboratory workflow. With a strong inclination toward understanding and researching how laboratories and data management is evolving globally, she collaborates with her clients, partners, and end users to see through and contribute across unique automation requirements. Ankita, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Maribeth, for the introduction. Good afternoon, everyone. Just to introduce myself, this is Ankita Acharya. I'm a LIMS implementation expert with CloudLIMS.com. And today I'll be talking about an important topic that bugs a lot of food testing laboratories. Is your food testing lab ready for an FDA inspection? So starting with, we will be discussing about food safety and challenges, the FSMA definitions and details, how to leverage automation to meet FSMA requirements, and how a LIMS helps. And at the end of it, we'll be open for questions. Starting with, what is food safety? Food safety is the safe handling of food items through sampling, manufacturing, preparation, packaging, distribution, storage of food to avoid foodborne illnesses. And why is it important? It is important because food safety, nutrition, and food security are closely linked to each other. Unsafe and adulterated food products leads to a cycle of disease and malnutrition, and this primarily affects the vulnerable group, that are the children, the elderly, and the sick. In addition to the obvious health implications, a safe food supply chain also boosts national and international economies, eliminates trade barriers, and stimulates sustainable development. But with everything that is important, there comes certain challenges as well. So some of the primary challenges that any food safety testing laboratory faces includes globalization. So food imports and exports, food production and packaging is no longer limited to a particular area. Globalization of the food industry has led to changes in the food production and supply chain. This has resulted in more foods being imported and exported from a greater region. In addition to that, there are environmental changes and the introduction of new and emerging bacteria, toxins, antibiotic resistance, and obviously the viruses. And then there's also a change in the detection methods for foodborne illnesses. On the top of all of that, there is a change in the consumer pattern. There's a constant change in consumer preferences and dietary habits. As we have seen with the COVID-19 pandemic, a lot of people have actually changed their dietary habits and they have inculcated healthy eating habits as a method of increasing their immunity. That again directly affects food safety and is a part of the food safety challenges. So in order to help laboratories tackle these challenges, the FDA introduced the FSMA in January 2011. FSMA stands for Food Safety Modernization Act, and it helps FDA focus on preventing contamination during food manufacturing processes. It does so by enabling FDA to scientifically evaluate food safety and preventive measures that food manufacturing units implement in order to manage the food safety practices. In addition to that, FDA also requires food testing laboratories and food manufacturing units to provide documentary evidence on the process that they implement for generating safer products. So let's talk a little bit about what are the different FDA requirements, FSMA requirements. They include using appropriate analytical procedures and certifying its report of analysis as accurate and true. establishing and maintaining internal quality systems, establishing procedures to respond and evaluate to complaints regarding analysis and other activities pertaining to a laboratory's offerings, establish control and maintain records related to food testing activities of a laboratory, and the most important, compliance with the ISO 17025:2017 guidelines. In order to achieve these requirements, some of the easiest methods that a laboratory can implement, or some of the best practices that a laboratory can implement, includes having a proper food safety management plan, ability to completely trace samples from farm to fork, quality assurance and quality management to ensure that quality is properly met, document management. So with increasing changes in like we discussed, one of the major challenges that food safety practices or laboratories face is the fact that there are constantly developing environmental factors, new bacteria coming into the picture, new viruses coming into the picture, changes in the detection method. This leads to a constant update of the SOPs and the workflows that a laboratory follows. So it's very important for labs to have a proper document management and for labs to have easy access for these documents to different technicians of the laboratory. A read-only audit trail to ensure that everything is constantly monitored and somebody at any point of time, a manager or a head, lab head or director can go back and check the audit trails to see what activity was performed at what point of time. And then adherence to the ISO 17025 guidelines that will enable a laboratory to easily meet the FSMA requirements. The best way to follow these best practices actually by automation. And again, the best way to automate something is by implementation of a LIMS. So what is a LIMS? Well, a LIMS is a laboratory information management system. It's a software solution. It addresses the data management, automation, and regulatory challenges of different food testing laboratories across the globe. It helps you schedule instrument calibration maintenance, helps you take a track of your training records of different personnel. It helps you automate your testing workflows and integrate with analytical instruments for data transfer, thus eliminating scope of human error. Additionally, it ensures complete traceability of a sample from farm to fork that increases productivity and enforces staff to follow safety protocols properly. It also easily identifies trends across QC samples, assuring quality and maintaining proper quality control across the test procedures. A LIMS also helps you with managing all of your constantly changing documents and SOPs, establishes an easy access to an audit, and helps meet compliance with ease. This overall decreases the turnaround time of your laboratories and enhances the efficiency of both food testing labs and food processing units. LIMS also helps you eliminate human interaction and thus diminish any possibilities or scopes of human error. Before we proceed to understand how a LIMS actually meets this requirement, I was just reminded of a case that recently happened with JBS USA Food Co. So they recently had to recall approximately 4,860 pounds of imported boneless beef products back from the market after the US Department of Agriculture's Food and Safety Inspection Services, during one of their routine checks, found or confirmed the presence of E. coli in those samples. This leads to what this example basically touches two important points. First, the importance of ensuring that food is properly tested and food safety is properly ensured so that the laboratories or businesses do not suffer recalls that could lead to massive production costs that has to be incurred by the businesses. And second, the ability to have a complete trace. Because they were able to trace a sample from farm to fork, they were able to call back the samples as well because they had the records of that, which is why again, it is important to automate because automation will actually help you with maintaining details and maintaining records easily. And it's very important to manage food safety so that your laboratories meets the required standards and do not suffer any sort of business losses or cause any sort of losses. So moving on, let's talk about how a LIMS can actually help you with managing the automation and ensure all these points that we just discussed. Starting with, let's talk about sample traceability and barcoding capabilities. So in a LIMS, as you can see in a LIMS, you can measure or record all the sample details easily at one place. You can also segregate them based on the sample type. Additionally, you can accession them with a one-dimensional or two-dimensional barcode or an RFID. And these barcodes or RFIDs would stay with the sample during the entire life cycle in the laboratory and after packaging. It also allows you to trace a final packaged product back to the raw material. In addition to that, LIMS also allows you to maintain a chain of custody. Why is this important? Well, when a sample is received from the laboratory, it passes through multiple hands. A technician might be responsible for accessing it, another might be responsible for testing it, and a third might be responsible for the packaging. To ensure that the entire chain of custody is properly recorded is very important. A LIMS allows you to track this chain of custody from accessioning to disposal, along with the time and date stamp that you can see over here, and the information about which user or which technician was handling that particular sample at what point of time and for what activity. In addition to that, a LIMS might also demand you to authenticate key laboratory activities through electronic signatures. Meaning, for any laboratory technician to be able to perform an activity, they would have to digitally sign in into the LIMS system and also specify a set of valid reasons as to why they're performing that activity before they can actually go ahead and perform any vital activity in the system in relevance to the laboratory. Now, because we're talking about testing labs, an important part is actually the test orders that a laboratory receives. So it's very important for labs to be able to review the test requests that they receive from the client and record the information at one place. A LIMS allows you to easily record all the information or all the test records that you receive from various clients across different sections or different time points at one place. You can review those requests, see if they check all the boxes that is required by a laboratory, and at the end of that, you can either accept or reject the test order based on your laboratory's requirements. Moving on, once you receive the test, you accept the test order, you perform the test in the laboratory, and then you have to transfer the results from the system analytical instrument to a LIMS for record keeping. Well, a LIMS actually allows you to directly integrate with these analytical instruments to automatically record data from the instrument into the LIMS system. This basically eliminates human interaction and hence increases or maintains data integrity and doesn't leave much scope for error in terms of human handling. In addition to that, a LIMS can actually also integrate with software such as, let's say, an ERP or a billing system. So this actually helps you manage your day-to-day business activities in the laboratory as well using the LIMS system. Now, once the results are in the system, a very important point is to get them validated. We need to understand and know that the results that were recorded are properly validated before we could release it back, because a laboratory will hold accountability for these results. A LIMS actually helps you configure a test validation process. You can send multiple tests for results to validation. You can also specify which test needs to go to which validating officer or verifier or authorized user for testing validation. And then you can track the validation status as well. All of this actually leads to assuring the final test results to be correct and validated. Once you have validated your test results, LIMS also allows you to generate a custom COA using the LIMS. So in the custom COA, you can design your COA based on the information that you would like to show on the results or on the COA, and you can also make sure that it made so it ticks all the boxes relevant to your regulatory compliance requirements. Once it is done, LIMS also helps you to manage the quality control samples, detect the results across different trends, and quickly find the sample that are outliers in your quality samples to pick them up on. Now, another important part of the laboratory is the instrument that these tests are run on. It's very important that these instruments are properly calibrated and maintained so that they give the proper results when tested on. So a LIMS actually allows you to track all the equipment that you have in the lab, track all of its individual components, and also keep a track on the calibration and maintenance cycles of these instruments. And whenever a calibration or maintenance is coming up, your instrument requires to be recalibrated or remaintained, the LIMS will send you an alert saying it's time to get that done. Another important aspect, like we were talking about, is the document management. Well, just like we discussed a little earlier, trends are changing, the new viruses are coming into the picture, example, the COVID-19 pandemic. So with all of these factors, there's a constant change in the SOPs and the workflows and the methodologies that are implemented in the lab. And obviously, there's also a constant change in the safety protocols implemented in the laboratory. So for every document or every SOP that is updated, the documents related to that should also be updated. and also be reviewed and made available easily to all the authorized users or all the authorized technicians. A LIMS allows you to manage the documents such as the SOPs or workflows or methodologies or guidelines and quickly provide access to all those documents to authorized users. Additionally, because you're talking about users, you're talking about technicians, it's also important to train them on all these changing technologies, all these changing innovations, or in all these changing aspects of the food safety laboratory or your testing laboratory. So a LIMS actually allows you to maintain a record of all the staff that you have, all the training sessions that they have attended. And at the end of it, you can also mark their individual competency in these training records. So this is important. Why? Because when a new test order comes in or you have a new analysis that needs to be performed, so you need to be able to figure out which technician is trained enough to handle that analysis or handle that test order. So LIMS allows you to categorize all the staff that you have, take a track of all the training that has been conducted for them, and mark their competency so that you can easily pick the right technician for the right analysis. And at the end of all of that, like mentioned, it's very important to keep records and maintain an audit trail, something that you can go back to and refer as and when required based on anything that might come up in the laboratory. So yes, a LIMS allows you to have a complete audit trail of each and every activity performed in the laboratory, along with the time and date stamp and the name of the user who performs that activity, so that you can go back and refer to that audit trail both for internal purposes as well as for external audit purposes. So overall, some of the key takeaways that we discussed in today's meeting or today's webinar here was an overview of FSMA requirements for food testing laboratories for food safety, discovering how automation enables easy retrieval and visibility of data and enhances data security, and learning how a LIMS drives automation and enables food testing labs to meet FSMA requirements with ease. Thank you so much for listening so patiently, and now we're open for questions. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thanks you very much, Ankita. At this point, we're going to move on to our audience Q&A. So if any of you have questions for Ankita, you can submit them in the Q&A box, which is located on the right-hand side of your screen. So Ankita, our first question is, I am the lab manager of a juice testing laboratory. We have predefined workflows for testing samples. How can I enforce staff to follow the SOPs and track deviations from standard workflows?
In case you have a set of SOPs and you want to make sure that your staff members are going to be able to meet these workflow requirements, LIMS actually allows you to make sure that all of these SOPs are properly recorded in the system. You can make them available for the staff to cross-check before they actually go ahead and follow or perform a test procedure. Also, a LIMS actually allows you to set up a set of workflow steps. So every time your staff member conducts a step, they can just go back, mark that particular step as conducted or completed, and then this can be reviewed as well. Which means that every staff member who performs a particular testing activity would have to go to the SOPs, check the SOPs, and once they perform the steps, they have to go back and mark the workflow as done. And all of this could be reviewed by a lab manager or a lab director to make sure that the staff follows all the proper steps that are required for the workflow.
Okay, great. Thank you. We have another question that says, we are a NASN food testing laboratory. We're aiming for ISO 17025 accreditation. What is the best time to implement a LIMS, and does CloudLIMS have the features to meet ISO 17025 compliance?
To be very honest, the best time to start looking for a LIMS is right when you have decided what is the end goal for your lab, and when you are ready with a brief overview or overview of the kind of workflows that you would be implementing in the lab. There are multiple vendors out there, and to make sure that you have the LIMS that best suits the requirement, you should be able to understand what every vendor offers, what each LIMS offers, and then according to that, choose a LIMS that would be best required for your laboratory. Also, it's always advisable that you get the LIMS configured and implemented before you actually start taking in the sample, so that you can go live with the LIMS as soon as you're ready with your samples without there being a gap in between having the LIMS and having the samples ready. CloudLIMS suddenly has features to meet ISO 17025 requirements. We have a complete QMS model, including an instrument management module, a document management module, and a training management module, all of which are very important parts of the ISO 17025 requirements or compliance. Each of this module basically allows you to keep a track of different instruments that you have in the lab. Make sure that instruments are properly calibrated and maintained. Make sure that every document, including SOPs, workflows, methodologies, are easily accessible to all staff members, and that they're properly reviewed, and there's also control on the version history of these documents. And then the training model makes sure that only competent staff members are assigned to particular tasks or analysis. In addition to that, CloudLIMS also has a user role-based access permission that allows you to control electronic records and only provide information and access to those who have proper user access. It also offers an audit trail that allows you to keep a track of every activity that you perform in the lab, right from logging in to logging out, along with the time and date stamp and the name of the user who performs the activity. It also offers you a complete validation workflow, which means that you can entirely check the validation of your tests while they're running. Once your results are in, a validating officer would be able to validate all the different tests that have been conducted, check and quickly see if the instruments are properly calibrated, if the analyst performing that particular test was properly competent enough to handle it, and at the end of it, they can just sign it off saying that, okay, this is validated. And only then you'll be able to release those results or send those test reports into a COA. LIMS also allows you to actually generate custom COAs based on your laboratories and based on your compliance requirements. And also you have the option, because we're talking about food testing lab, you also have the option of reviewing everything that comes into the lab. All tests can also be reviewed at one go. So these are all different features that would be a major requirement of the ISO 70225 compliance, and CloudLIMS definitely has these features to ensure that your lab would be easily compliant with the ISO 70225 requirements.
Okay, wonderful. Thanks so much. We have another question that says, do you have support for charting trend analysis? How will I know if my batch is approved for distribution?
In case of trend analysis, yes. So CloudLIMS actually has a proper way to make sure that you're able to track the trend across all different samples. So you can pick up the different samples, you can pick up the QC samples and easily chart the trends across different analytes. That will easily allow you to pick up outliers as well. And in terms of getting your batches approved, like I was just mentioning, we have a validation workflow in place that will allow you to send multiple tests for validation. Once they're sent for validation, an authorized officer will be able to validate that, make sure that it's properly validated, everything is in place, all results are properly recorded, all instruments are properly calibrated, and only after the approval you would be able to go ahead and approve them or approve that batch or that test as validated and completed and results are assured.
Okay, wonderful. Thanks. We have a few more questions that have come in. We are looking for a system that can send automatic notifications to our customers as soon as the results are available and can help them quickly access the test reports. Does CloudLIMS have such a functionality?
We do actually. So CloudLIMS comes with a custom client portal that allows your clients to actually go ahead and control everything in terms of what samples are sending in, what tests they want to place order for. And as soon as these tests are completed and properly validated, you can control the release of the COA back to the client. And while you're doing that, you also have the option of easily notifying them on email saying that, hey, your results are ready and this is a COA. So yes, the portal actually allows CloudLIMS to easily, basically your lab to easily reach out to your customers saying that your results are ready and you can just view them from here.
Okay, wonderful. Thanks so much. We have a few more audience questions. How does one interpret and read a chromatography graph?
So I think this would be a question more appropriate for a laboratory, because they would be able to assist you better in terms of handling chromatography graph. But yeah, I can cross-check with the team and get back to you on a result or on a more detailed information on it, definitely.
Okay, great, thanks. And as a reminder, we have everyone's contact info who has asked questions, so you will be able to get back to them later, so that's great. We have another question that says, at what dose does the contamination make the poison?
Again, this would basically depend on what is the contamination and what food product are you testing for. So it depends upon the product that you're testing for and the parameters that you're testing them for.
Okay, great, thanks. Why is one food healthy for one DNA sequence yet unhealthy for another?
I think the answer to that actually lies in the sequence itself. Like we all know that some ethnic communities have DNA codes that actually provide them immunity to certain diseases, while others don't. So the answer really lies in the basic code, like how your DNA codes for and what environmental factors you are exposed to, and what food habits or what consumer patterns you are used to. So it would all depend upon basically deciding whether a particular DNA or food would affect your DNA or work on it in a particular way or not.
All right, great, thanks. We have a couple more questions. Is there a component in beef incompatible with some Hindu genotypes?
I am not sure or aware of that, definitely. So, I mean, this would definitely be a very interesting topic to go back and have a look on, but I believe not.
Okay, great, thanks. I think we have time for one more question here. So that is, what are the necessary lab supplies and equipment?
That would depend upon the kind of test you're conducting or the kind of workflow that you want to implement in your lab. Based on that, based on once you have your workflow and you have the end goals in place, you can basically go for lab supplies that would trace somewhere between, that would basically include somewhere between all the inventory items you would require in terms of sample traceability, sample transport, testing, and similarly, based on the different tests that you're performing, you would like to order your analyzers and equipments based on what end results and goals you're trying to meet, and what different parameters analytes you're going to be testing for.
Okay, wonderful. Thanks so much. And as a reminder, if we did not get to your question, it will be forwarded to Ankita and the rest of the CloudLIMS.com team, and they will be able to get back to you personally. So this brings us to the end of today's webinar. I'd just like to remind you all this webinar will be available for free on-demand download shortly following this live presentation. So on behalf of Lab Manager, I'd like to thank Ankita Acharya for all the hard work she put into her presentation, and I'd like to thank all of you for taking time out of your busy schedules to join us today. I'd also like to thank our sponsor, CloudLIMS.com, for their support, which allows Lab Manager to offer these webinars free of charge for our readers. For more information on all of our upcoming or on-demand webinars, or to learn more about the latest tools and technologies for the laboratory, please visit our website at labmanager.com. We hope you can join us again. Thank you and have a great day.
Thank you.